The quiet neighborhood of Pine Grove had always been a safe haven for its residents, especially for the 12-year-old boy who lived with his mother in the small blue house at the corner of Maple Street. His best friend wasn't another kid from school or a neighbor from down the street, it was his loyal German shepherd, Max, who had been by his side since he was just 6 years old. Every afternoon, the boy would walk home from school with Max faithfully trotting beside him, carrying his worn-out backpack filled with textbooks and half-finished homework. The duo had their routine down to perfection. They'd stop at the old oak tree where Max would chase squirrels for a few minutes, then continue their journey home, with the boy sharing stories about his day while Max listened attentively, his ears perking up at every excited word. That fateful Tuesday seemed like any other day. The autumn air was crisp, and fallen leaves crunched beneath their feet as they made their way home. The boy had just received his first paycheck from his weekend paper route, $35 that he'd earned all by himself. He planned to buy his mom a birthday present with the money, something special to show her how much he appreciated her working 2 jobs to give him a better life. But someone else had been watching. A figure in a dark hoodie had noticed the boy's routine over the past few weeks. Hidden behind parked cars and garden hedges, the stranger had observed how the boy would pat his pocket every few minutes, checking if his precious envelope was still there. The thief had been waiting for the perfect moment, and today, when the boy decided to take the shortcut through the community garden, that moment arrived. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. The boy was admiring the last of the autumn flowers when a rough hand grabbed his shoulder. Max, who had been sniffing around nearby bushes, immediately sensed the danger. The boy's heart pounded as the hooded figure demanded the envelope, pushing him against the garden fence. Tears welled up in his eyes as he thought about his mom's birthday present slipping away. But Max wasn't going to let that happen. The usually gentle dog transformed into a fierce protector in an instant. His powerful bark echoed through the garden as he positioned himself between the boy and the thief. The stranger, who hadn't accounted for such a devoted guardian, hesitated for a moment. That hesitation would prove to be a crucial mistake. Max's training kicked in, not just as a pet, but as a loyal family member who understood exactly what was at stake. His teeth weren't bared in aggression, but his stance made it clear, no one would harm his young friend. The thief, realizing this wasn't going to be the easy target he'd imagined, began to back away slowly. The boy, still trembling but feeling braver with Max by his side, found his voice. He remembered what his mother had always taught him about being brave in difficult situations. With Max's reassuring presence, he stood a little straighter, even as his hands shook. This was more than just about the money now. It was about standing up to someone who thought they could prey on others. As the story of what happened next spread through Pine Grove, it would become clear that this was just the beginning of an extraordinary tale of loyalty, courage, and the unbreakable bond between a boy and his dog. But in that moment, frozen in the autumn afternoon, neither the boy nor Max knew that their ordinary walk home was about to become the first chapter of an adventure that would change not just their lives, but their entire community. As the thief retreated from the community garden, the boy's hands were still shaking, but Max's steady presence gave him strength. The German shepherd hadn't moved from his protective stance, his eyes fixed on the hooded figure until they disappeared around the corner. Only then did Max turn to his young friend, gently nuzzling the boy's trembling hands, as if to say, "It's okay now. You're safe." The afternoon sun was starting to dip lower in the sky as other neighbors began to notice the commotion. Mrs. Chen, the retired schoolteacher who tended to the community garden, had heard Max's bark from her kitchen window. She came hurrying out, her gardening apron still tied around her waist, her face etched with concern as she found the boy sitting on the ground, arms wrapped tightly around his faithful companion. "I heard barking," she said softly, kneeling beside them despite her aging knees. "Are you all right, dear?" The boy nodded, still processing what had just happened. As he recounted the incident, his voice grew stronger with each word. Max had saved not just his money, but possibly much more. Mrs. Chen insisted on calling both the police and the boy's mother. Within minutes, the quiet garden became a hub of activity. 2 police officers arrived first, their presence both reassuring and overwhelming. The younger officer knelt down to Max's level, clearly impressed by the dog's protective instincts. "You've got yourself quite a hero here," he said, offering Max a gentle pat that the dog accepted only after looking to his young friend for approval. The boy's mother arrived moments later, having left work early after receiving the call. Her face was pale with worry as she rushed through the garden gate, but color returned to her cheeks when she saw her son safe and sound. She wrapped him in a tight hug, then surprised everyone by hugging Max just as fiercely. "My brave boys," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. As the boy described the incident to the officers, neighbors began gathering around the garden's edge. The community had always been close-knit, but something about this incident struck a chord with everyone. The old man from the corner house mentioned seeing a suspicious character hanging around the school route lately. The owner of the local convenience store recalled someone matching the thief's description lurking near his shop after school hours. The police officers took detailed notes, but what really caught their attention was Max's behavior during the incident. "Most dogs would have either attacked or run away," the senior officer observed. "But your Max showed incredible restraint and intelligence. He protected without aggression, that's rare." That evening, as news of the incident spread through the neighborhood, something remarkable began to happen. People started coming by the house, not just to check on the boy, but to offer support in their own ways. The local baker brought over fresh bread, saying comfort food was important after a scare. The high school security guard offered to keep an eye on the boy's paper route. Even the grumpy neighbor who always complained about Max's occasional barking came by with a large bone for the neighborhood's newest hero. But perhaps the most touching moment came when the boy finally showed his mother the envelope he'd protected. When she learned it was meant for her birthday present, she couldn't hold back her tears. "You brave, wonderful boy," she said, hugging him close. "But you know what? I already have the best present I could ask for, you and Max, safe and sound." As they settled in for the night, the boy realized something had changed. The incident had shaken him, yes, but it had also shown him the true meaning of courage, loyalty, and community. Max lay at the foot of his bed, as always, but tonight the boy felt especially grateful for his four-legged guardian. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of how Max's heroic actions would transform their lives and their entire neighborhood. The following days brought unexpected changes to Pine Grove. Word of Max's heroics had spread beyond their neighborhood, catching the attention of the local news station. The boy's mother was hesitant about the publicity at first, worried about drawing too much attention to their family, but the police suggested that sharing their story might help catch the would-be thief and prevent similar incidents. On Thursday morning, a young reporter arrived at their house, her camera crew setting up equipment in their modest living room. Max seemed to understand the importance of the occasion, sitting regally beside the boy, his posture perfect and dignified. The boy found himself sharing their story with surprising ease, his voice growing confident as he described how Max had stood his ground without aggression. "He knew exactly what to do," the boy explained, scratching behind Max's ears. "It's like he understood that scaring the thief away was better than hurting them." The reporter was particularly impressed by this detail, noting how rare it was for a dog to show such measured response in a threatening situation. But the interview revealed something even more remarkable about Max's past. The boy's mother shared how they had adopted Max from the local shelter 3 years ago. The shelter workers had mentioned that Max had once been in training to become a service dog but hadn't completed the program. "Maybe that's why he's so good at reading situations," she suggested, wiping away tears as she recounted how Max had become not just a pet, but a guardian for her son. The story aired that evening on the local news, and its impact was immediate. The shelter where Max had come from was flooded with calls from people wanting to adopt dogs, particularly older ones who might have similar training backgrounds. The shelter manager called the boy's mother, emotional as she explained how Max's story was helping other dogs find homes. But perhaps the most significant development came from an unexpected source. A retired K-9 police officer watched the news segment and recognized something in Max's behavior that others had missed. He reached out to the family the next day, explaining that Max's response wasn't just good fortune, it showed evidence of advanced training. The way he positioned himself, how he maintained distance while establishing boundaries, these are specialized techniques, the former officer explained as he sat in their kitchen. Max had taken to him immediately, showing the kind of recognition that dogs often display towards people familiar with training techniques. The retired officer shared his theory: Max had likely been in an advanced protection dog program, not just basic service dog training. Sometimes, dogs with the highest potential wash out of these programs not because they lack ability, but because they're too independent thinkers, he explained. They make their own judgments instead of just following commands. That's exactly what Max did in the garden. He assessed the situation and chose the most appropriate response. This revelation cast Max's actions in a new light. The boy had always known his dog was special, but understanding the depth of Max's training made him appreciate their bond even more. It wasn't just instinct that had protected him that day, it was years of sophisticated training combined with Max's natural intelligence and devotion. As they sat in the backyard that evening, the boy watched Max playing with his favorite ball, seemingly unaware of his growing fame. To the casual observer, he looked like any other beloved family pet, but now they knew he carried within him a remarkable combination of professional training and natural protective instincts. The boy's mother had been quiet for much of the day, processing everything they'd learned. Finally, she spoke what was on both their minds. Maybe Max didn't wash out of training at all. Maybe he was just waiting for the right family to protect. She smiled as Max trotted over, dropping his ball at the boy's feet. And I think he chose us as much as we chose him. The weekend arrived with an unexpected invitation. The retired K-9 officer, who had introduced himself as Officer Jim, offered to help the boy understand Max's capabilities better. With his mother's permission, they met at the local park early Saturday morning, where Officer Jim had set up a small training area using simple equipment from his days as a trainer. The morning dew still clung to the grass as Officer Jim explained how to recognize Max's various alert signals. See how his ears shift when he notices something unusual, he demonstrated, having a volunteer walk behind them. He's been doing this all along, but now you'll know what to look for. The boy watched in amazement as Max displayed dozens of subtle behaviors he'd never noticed before. Other families from the neighborhood had gathered to watch, keeping a respectful distance as Officer Jim worked with Max and the boy. Among the onlookers was the owner of the local hardware store, who had recently lost some merchandise to shoplifting. He watched thoughtfully as Max demonstrated his training, an idea forming in his mind. As the training session progressed, something remarkable happened. Other dog owners in the park began asking questions about training their own pets. Officer Jim explained that while not every dog could be trained to Max's level, all dogs could learn basic protective behaviors that would help keep their families safe. The park had become an impromptu community safety seminar. But the most touching moment came when a small girl, no more than 7 years old, approached with her mother. The girl had been frightened of dogs since a scary encounter the previous year, but something about Max's gentle demeanor caught her attention. Officer Jim noticed her interest and paused the training session. "Would you like to meet Max properly?" he asked, explaining how to safely approach a dog. The boy, remembering how Max had helped him feel brave during the attempted robbery, encouraged her with a gentle smile. Under Officer Jim's guidance, the girl slowly extended her hand, her fear giving way to delight as Max gave her fingers a gentle sniff before sitting politely, waiting for permission to make friends. The hardware store owner couldn't contain his enthusiasm any longer. He approached the boy's mother with a proposition: would they consider bringing Max to his store occasionally? Just his presence might deter shoplifters, he explained. Plus, he'd be a wonderful ambassador for the shopping district. The boy's mother promised to think about it, though she was careful not to overcommit. After all, Max was first and foremost their family dog. As the training session wrapped up, Officer Jim shared something that left everyone deep in thought. Dogs like Max remind us that sometimes our greatest protectors are also our gentlest friends, he said, watching as Max now played with several children, his earlier alertness replaced by playful joy. They don't just guard us with their strength, they guard us with their hearts. The boy's mother noticed how the morning had transformed her son. He stood taller now, more confident as he helped Officer Jim explain Max's training to interested neighbors. The trauma of the attempted robbery was being replaced by something powerful, a sense of purpose and community. On their walk home, they noticed more neighbors than usual were out in their front yards, exchanging phone numbers and discussing the possibility of starting a community watch program. Max's story had sparked something bigger than themselves, a reminder that safety comes not just from locks and alarms, but from neighbors looking out for each other. That evening, as the boy worked on his paper route schedule for the following week, he noticed something had changed. The same route he'd been nervous about just days ago now felt different. With Max by his side and a community of neighbors watching out for him, fear had been replaced by a sense of belonging and strength. Monday morning brought unexpected news that sent ripples through Pine Grove. The police had made progress in their investigation, thanks to the community's increased vigilance. Several resident security cameras had captured images of the hooded figure from the attempted robbery, and a pattern was emerging. The same person had been spotted near other schools in neighboring areas. The boy's mother sat him down at the kitchen table, Max dutifully at their feet, as she shared what the police had told her. The would-be thief wasn't just a random opportunist, they had been targeting school children specifically, looking for those who walked home alone. The boy's case was different though. It was the first time the thief had encountered serious resistance, and Max's intervention had done more than just prevent a robbery. Your experience helped create awareness, his mother explained, her voice tight with emotion. Other parents are now walking their kids home, and schools are implementing new safety protocols. Max's ears perked up at her serious tone, and he rested his head on the boy's lap, offering silent comfort as always. The hardware store owner's offer was starting to make more sense now. That afternoon, they visited his shop to discuss the details. The store had a small reading corner where children often waited while their parents shopped. The owner suggested that Max could stay there with the boy after school, creating a safe space for other students who needed a place to wait for their parents. Think of it as a safety point, the owner explained, showing them the cozy corner with its comfortable chairs and good visibility of both the store entrance and the street. Max already knows how to handle difficult situations, and his presence alone might discourage any troublemakers. The boy's mother was touched by how the owner had thought everything through. He'd even spoken to his insurance company about having a certified protection dog on the premises. The reading corner would be supervised by the store's regular staff, and the boy could work on his homework there while keeping Max company. Word of this initiative spread quickly through the parent networks. The local elementary school principal visited the hardware store herself to see the setup. She was impressed not just by the safety aspects, but by how the store owner had transformed a potential threat into an opportunity to build community. Sometimes it takes something scary to remind us how to look after each other, she observed, watching as Max demonstrated his perfect sit and stay commands for her. The boy couldn't help but feel proud. His dog wasn't just his protector anymore, he was becoming a symbol of hope for the whole neighborhood. That evening, as they walked home from the hardware store, they noticed more families out walking together. Parents smiled and waved, kids pointed excitedly at Max, and there was a new feeling of connection in the air. The boy realized that what had started as a frightening encounter had transformed into something remarkable, a reminder that true safety comes from community bonds. His mother had been quiet during their walk, lost in thought. Finally, she spoke, "You know, when I first heard about what happened in the garden, all I could think about was what could have gone wrong. But now..." She paused, watching Max trot confidently beside them. "Now I see how much has gone right because of it." They stopped at the community garden, which had become something of a symbol since the incident. Mrs. Chen was there, planting spring bulbs with help from some neighborhood children. She waved them over, showing how the community had decided to install better lighting and create a buddy system for young gardeners. The garden, once a place of fear, was being reclaimed as a space of growth and connection. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the garden, the boy scratched Max behind the ears, exactly where he liked it best. His faithful companion had not only protected him from a thief but had helped an entire community remember the importance of looking out for one another. As the days grew shorter and autumn deepened, the hardware store's reading corner had become a bustling hub of activity. Every afternoon, students would gather there, completing homework and sharing stories while Max kept his watchful eye on everything. The boy had noticed how his dog seemed to pay special attention to the younger children, positioning himself near those who seemed nervous or unsure. One rainy Wednesday afternoon, something happened that proved just how valuable their new safety point had become. A sixth-grade girl rushed into the store, clearly upset. She explained between shaky breaths that someone had been following her from school. Without hesitation, the store owner called her parents while Max and the boy stayed with her, offering quiet comfort. The girl gradually calmed down as she stroked Max's fur, her trembling hands steadying with each gentle pat. "I remembered what they said on the news," she explained, "about finding a safe place if you feel scared. When I saw the sign about Max being here, I knew where to go." The boy felt a surge of pride. Their safety corner was working exactly as intended. The police arrived shortly after, along with the girl's parents. As they reviewed the store's security cameras, they noticed something significant. The suspicious person who had followed her matched the description of their attempted robber. Officer Jim, who happened to be in the area, came by to review the footage as well. "This is exactly what we needed," he said, studying the grainy images. "They're getting bolder, but they're also getting careless." He explained how the community's increased awareness was making it harder for the thief to operate, forcing them to take greater risks. The hardware store's cameras had captured the clearest images yet of the suspect. That evening, the local news ran a story about the hardware store's safety initiative. They interviewed several parents who spoke about how the presence of a trained dog in a designated safe space had given them peace of mind. The boy's mother watched the broadcast with tears in her eyes, amazed at how their difficult experience had led to something so positive. But it wasn't just the safety aspect that was making a difference. The reading corner had become a place where kids from different schools and neighborhoods could meet and become friends. Max seemed to have a sixth sense about who needed extra attention. He would quietly rest his head on the lap of a child having a tough day, or playfully fetch a dropped pencil for someone struggling with math homework. The boy had also noticed changes in himself. He was no longer just the kid with the brave dog, he had become someone other students looked up to. Younger children would ask him for advice about dealing with bullies or walking home safely. He found himself sharing what Officer Jim had taught him about awareness and confidence, always emphasizing that true safety came from community connection. His paper route had evolved too. Other kids from the reading corner would sometimes join him and Max on their rounds, turning what used to be a solitary job into a social activity. They called themselves the Paper Route Patrol, and parents appreciated how the older kids looked out for the younger ones. 1 month after the attempted robbery, the hardware store owner organized a community safety workshop. Officer Jim led sessions on personal safety, while other local experts shared tips about home security and neighborhood watch programs. Max demonstrated his training again, but this time, there was a surprise. The retired K-9 officer had been working with other dog owners, and several other pets were now ready to show off their new safety skills. As the boy watched the workshop unfold, he realized something profound. The thief had meant to take something from him that day in the garden, but instead, they had inadvertently given something to the entire community, a reason to come together, to look out for each other, and to turn fear into strength. The community safety workshop had sparked something unexpected in Pine Grove. Local businesses began offering their spaces as additional safety points, creating a network of secure locations throughout the neighborhood. The hardware store's reading corner remained the heart of it all, with Max as its four-legged guardian, but now children had multiple places they could turn to if they ever felt unsafe. But on a chilly Thursday afternoon, the police investigation took a dramatic turn. The boy was at the reading corner with Max when Officer Jim rushed in, his face serious but excited. The security footage from the day the young girl had been followed, combined with tips from neighboring communities, had helped them identify the suspect. They were closing in, but they needed the community's help to be extra vigilant. "We believe they might try one last attempt before leaving the area," Officer Jim explained to the store owner and the boy's mother, who had been called to the meeting. "They've been spotted in the shopping district again, but this time, we're ready." He glanced at Max, who sat alert and attentive, as if understanding the gravity of the conversation. The next day, the paper route patrol implemented new safety measures. The boy's mother had helped them create a buddy system, ensuring no one ever delivered papers alone. They used their parents' old walkie-talkies to stay in contact, turning their after-school job into a well-organized team activity. Max seemed to enjoy having more company, though he never let his guard down. That weekend, the local shelter where Max had come from organized an adoption event right outside the hardware store. They brought dogs who, like Max, had previous training or showed potential for it. The event drew crowds, not just from Pine Grove but from neighboring areas too. People shared stories about how the recent events had changed their perspective on community safety and the role pets could play in it. A surprise visitor at the adoption event was a professional dog trainer who had seen the news coverage of Max's story. She explained that some of her former training dogs had ended up in shelters due to program budget cuts or changes in requirements. "These dogs aren't failures," she emphasized. "They just needed the right opportunity to show their true potential." As families met potential new pets, the trainer worked with current dog owners, teaching them basic safety commands. The boy watched with pride as Max helped demonstrate, showing the same patience with other dogs that he showed with children at the reading corner. Even dogs that had been considered too energetic or too independent began to show signs of their hidden capabilities. The boy's mother had been quiet throughout much of the event, watching thoughtfully as Max worked with the trainer. Finally, she shared something she'd been keeping to herself. She had received a job offer from a company that would pay better than her current 2 jobs combined. Before the incident with the thief, she had been worried about leaving the boy alone after school while she worked later hours. Now, with the reading corner, the paper route patrol, and their stronger community connections, she felt confident about making the change. "Sometimes good things come from scary situations," she said, hugging her son close. "We just have to be brave enough to see the opportunities." The boy understood what she meant. The attempted robbery had been frightening, but it had led to positive changes none of them could have imagined. Late that afternoon, as they were packing up from the adoption event, Officer Jim stopped by with an update. The police had received several new tips about the suspect's whereabouts, thanks to the community's increased awareness. They were planning an operation for the following week, and while he couldn't share the details, he wanted them to know that Max's story had played a crucial role in bringing people together to help solve the case. As they walked home that evening, the boy noticed how different their neighborhood felt compared to just a few weeks ago. Porch lights were on, neighbors waved to each other, and children played freely under the watchful eyes of their community. Max trotted beside him, alert as always but relaxed, somehow knowing that his brave act had set in motion changes that would keep everyone safer, not just his young friend. The following week brought an unusual chill to Pine Grove, with frost coating the grass each morning and breath visible in the crisp air. The police operation was underway, though few knew the details. Officer Jim had asked the community to maintain their normal routines while staying alert for anything suspicious. The hardware store's reading corner remained open, but there was an underlying tension in the air. Wednesday afternoon started like any other. The boy was helping younger students with their math homework while Max kept his usual watchful eye on the store's entrance. The paper route patrol had finished their deliveries early, and several members were gathered around a table, planning weekend safety routes. Nobody noticed at first when a hooded figure paused outside, studying the store's window display. But Max noticed. His ears perked up, and he shifted position slightly, moving closer to the children while keeping his eyes fixed on the entrance. The boy recognized the subtle signs Officer Jim had taught him. Max wasn't alarmed, but he was alert. Something was different about this particular passerby. The store owner had been trained for this moment. Without drawing attention, he pressed the silent alert button installed after the first incident. Within minutes, plainclothed officers who had been positioned nearby began casually entering the store, pretending to shop while taking up strategic positions. The hooded figure finally entered, pretending to browse the tool section. The boy's heart began to race as he recognized the way they moved. It was the same person from the garden. Max remained incredibly calm, but his posture had changed. He was now standing, positioning himself between the children and the newcomer, just as he had done that day in the garden. What happened next unfolded like a well-rehearsed dance. As the suspect moved toward the reading corner, likely planning to use the children as a distraction for whatever they had planned, they found themselves suddenly surrounded. Officer Jim emerged from the back room, other officers moved in from the aisles, and Max, still without showing any aggression, let out one deep, warning bark that froze the suspect in their tracks. "I believe we've met before," Officer Jim said calmly, "though last time, you ran away before we could talk." The suspect, realizing they were caught, tried to bolt for the door, but another officer was already there. Max hadn't moved from his protective position near the children, but his presence had been crucial. He had bought the police precious seconds by spotting the suspect early. As the officers led the suspect away, the true scope of the operation became clear. The police had been tracking them for days, gathering evidence about similar incidents in other neighborhoods. The hardware store had been under surveillance because they suspected the thief might return, drawn by the publicity around the new safety program. The boy's mother arrived quickly after getting the call, gathering her son in a tight hug. "Are you okay?" she asked, checking him over even though he had been perfectly safe the entire time. Max finally relaxed his guard duty, accepting praise and pets from relieved parents who had rushed to collect their children. That evening, a spontaneous gathering formed in the community garden. People brought food and drinks, celebrating not just the arrest but the way their neighborhood had transformed. Mrs. Chen had strung up lights in the trees, turning the once frightening space into a magical evening garden. The boy overheard snippets of conversation about how the incident had brought everyone closer, making their community stronger than ever. The local news crew arrived to cover the arrest, but they found a different story waiting for them. Instead of focusing on the fear and crime, they captured scenes of community celebration, children playing safely under twinkling garden lights, neighbors sharing food and stories, and Max, the catalyst for it all, accepting gentle pets from everyone who passed by. As the boy watched his neighbors laughing and talking together, he realized that what had started as a frightening encounter had become something remarkable. The thief had tried to take something from him that autumn afternoon, but instead, they had inadvertently given their entire community an opportunity to discover its strength, its heart, and its capacity for coming together. 1 month after the arrest, Pine Grove had settled into a new normal that felt stronger and more connected than ever before. The boy's mother had started her new job, and the reading corner had evolved into an official after-school program, complete with volunteer tutors and a rotating schedule of trained dogs from the shelter. Max remained the star attraction, but he seemed happy to share his guardian duties with his new four-legged colleagues. The police investigation had revealed that the suspect had been targeting several communities, taking advantage of children walking alone. But Pine Grove's response, the community safety points, the paper route patrol, and especially Max's intervention, had created a model that other neighborhoods were now adopting. Officer Jim had been invited to speak at community centers across the city, sharing how one brave dog had inspired a movement of neighborhood connection and safety. On a bright Saturday morning, the community gathered for the grand reopening of the expanded hardware store. The owner had knocked down a wall to create a permanent youth center, complete with study areas, a small library, and a special corner just for Max and his canine colleagues. The boy's mother cut the ribbon, her eyes shining with pride as she spoke about how a frightening experience had transformed into something beautiful. "Sometimes the best things in life come from moments that test us," she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "My son learned that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about standing strong even when you're scared. Max taught us that protection doesn't always mean aggression, and this community showed us that true safety comes from taking care of each other." The shelter had set up an adoption booth at the event, featuring dogs with special training backgrounds. Several families who had been inspired by Max's story were finalizing adoptions, each committed to continuing the training that would help their new pets become community guardians. The professional trainer who had visited earlier now offered regular workshops, teaching both dogs and their owners how to contribute to neighborhood safety. The boys' paper route had tripled in size, now managed by the entire paper route patrol team. They had special vests with reflective strips, donated by a local safety equipment company, and their example had inspired similar groups in neighboring areas. Max still accompanied them on deliveries, but now he had the help of other trained dogs, creating a network of four-legged guardians throughout the route. Mrs. Chen's community garden had become a symbol of transformation. Where the attempted robbery had once taken place, there now stood a beautiful archway covered in climbing roses. A small plaque told Max's story, not focusing on the crime, but on how one dog's courage had sparked a community's revival. Children who had once been afraid to walk alone now gathered there for gardening classes, supervised by a rotation of parents and their newly trained dogs. The boy's mother thrived in her new job, no longer worried about her son's after-school hours. The youth center provided a safe space, and the entire community had embraced their role as extended family. The boy had changed too, he walked taller now, confident in his ability to help others feel safe and supported. As the reopening celebration continued into the afternoon, the boy sat quietly with Max in their favorite spot in the garden. The German Shepherd's muzzle had started showing touches of gray, but his eyes were as alert and loving as ever. Together, they watched their transformed community, parents chatting while children played freely, new dog owners practicing training techniques, and neighbors genuinely looking out for each other. Officer Jim joined them, scratching Max behind the ears. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "sometimes it takes just one moment of courage to change everything." Max didn't just stop a thief that day, he showed us all what we could be when we look out for each other. The boy hugged Max close, feeling the steady heartbeat of his faithful friend. The thief had tried to take something from him that autumn day, but instead, they had set in motion events that gave everyone something far more valuable, a reminder that the strongest security comes not from locks and alarms, but from a community bound together by love, trust, and the inspiring example of a brave dog who knew exactly what to do.